thing to, put on in the background while you're sleeping or studying or just chilling. So yeah, be sure to subscribe, follow my Instagram, everything in the description, and let's get straight into these. Night out at the 10 p.m. diner. Every night, a different person walks down the street and screams for help. We aren't allowed to help them. Looking back, I feel dumb. Completely stupid, actually. I should have known that apartment was far too cheap to be right, even for a studio. I should have known there had to be a catch. The day I moved in was a complete blur. I insisted that no one help me, not wanting to prove any of my family members' suspicions about my character. By late afternoon, all my muscles ached terribly and my head throbbed. I fell back on my bare mattress, staring up at the ceiling fan with glazed over eyes. I pulled the damp strands of hair from my sweaty forehead, wincing in disgust. Someone knocked on my door, causing me to jump. I cursed under my breath, pushing myself up on my elbows. Two girls were peeking around my doorframe. Foolishly, I'd left it wide open, forgetting the old college rule. Only leave your door open if you want to make new friends. And I was not in the mood to make new friends. One of them, an Asian girl with choppy black hair, was grinning at me. The other stood a little further back, fingering a box of Marlboro Reds. "Hey," she said, nodding at me. Her voice was smooth and raspy at the same time. "Did you just move in?" I laid back down, rubbing my face with both hands, choosing not to bother with manners. "Yeah, about 5 seconds ago." "Cool." The girls walked in, evidently ignoring my very clear body language. The girl with the black hair ran her fingers along the edge of my desk and then picked up a little ceramic duck from my unpacked box of trinkets. "Grandma," I explained, feeling strangely offensive. "Cute," she replied, holding it up to her face. "Has anyone told you yet?" The other girl asked abruptly, looking around my apartment. She had tucked the cigarettes into the back pocket of her jeans and was now tugging at her long red braids. "Jesus, Gianna, give her a second." "Well, she needs to know." "Yeah, but we haven't even asked her name." I blinked at the two strangers incredulously. I hadn't even had enough time to put toilet paper in my bathroom, and here they were, touching my things and talking about me like I wasn't there. I just wanted to take a nap, honestly. "My name's Arden," I said. The girl with the red braids, Gianna, sat down next to me on my desk. "Did they tell you?" "Well, of course they did." "Rules." I blinked again, my face blank. I didn't know about any rules besides the typical renting. I had signed the lease after, at best, skimming over it. The landlord was a skinny woman who smelled of ashes, and I was fairly certain she had never developed the facial muscles necessary for smiling. I wasn't about to ask her any follow-up questions, especially when the rent was so cheap. The other girl laughed nervously. "Where did you move here from?" I ignored her. What rules? Gianna got a strange, wicked sort of smile on her face, bouncing a little on my mattress. The other girl sighed loudly. "Something happens here every night," she began, pulling out my rickety office chair and sitting down. "Something weird." "Like what?" I sat up, frowning at her. Finally, my interest was piqued. "Someone walks down the street," Gianna said, her voice reminding me of a camp counselor telling me a scary story about the bonfire. "That one, right down there." She pointed at my window. "There's someone different. They screamed for help for about an hour, but we aren't supposed to help them." I just stared at her. I felt a small chill run up my spine. I didn't know what to make of all this. "It happens at a different time every night," the other one said, softly. "We never know when it's coming." "Why?" She shrugged, almost sadly. "We don't know why." I scoffed, leaning my elbows against my knees. "I don't believe you." The girl shrugged. "You don't have to. You'll see for yourself." The look in her eyes made me want to believe her. She seemed sincere, but I couldn't even begin to fathom what they were saying being true. It was too strange, too outlandish. I knew this wouldn't be the nicest neighborhood, but it couldn't be that bad. It had to be a prank. They had to be hazing me or something. "We'll come back later," Gianna said matter-of-factly. "We'll show you." Before I could protest, she grabbed the other girl by the wrist and they were gone. I followed them to the door, watching them march down the hall, talking to each other in hushed voices. I closed the door behind them. That night, as promised, they came back. They came dragging along two boys. One was somewhat muscular, wearing a tight black t-shirt and baggy jeans, and my eyes were instantly drawn to a silver heart-shaped locket around his neck. He smiled at me and introduced himself as Will when he walked in. The other boy was smaller but chubbier, buzz-cut, ill-fitting cargo shorts. His name, I was told, was Mateo. The girl named Gianna was carrying a bottle of wine, and that same slight, crumpled box of cigarettes. The other one, the girl I still didn't know the name of, was the only one who looked even somewhat apologetic. They all sat down on my dusty floor next to the window and motioned for me to join them. I sat between Will and the nameless girl, unsure whether I should continue feeling violated or if I should just give in to my strange, pushy neighbors. Do you all live in this building? I asked, hesitantly accepting the wine when it was passed to me. Yeah, Will answered with a grin. It seemed half-hearted. This building is where all the young people live. It's where they put us, Gianna cut in, lighting a cigarette. It didn't even occur to me to tell her not to smoke inside. We've been sorted out. Forgive her, she's a bit of a conspiracy theorist. It's not a theory, she snapped, glaring at him. Look at the other ones. Next door, the middle-agers, people with kids but no grandkids. Across the street, old people. Not a single 20-something in that entire building. May, tell her. So her name was May. I looked over at her, admiring her smoky eye makeup and how she'd tied up her hair, long strands poking out like exploding fireworks. Stop it, May muttered, reaching for the window. You'll scare her.
I'm on
I'm
a
not
window
scared.
still.
She just shrugged at me as if she didn't believe me. We passed the bottle around and then around again. I listened to them bicker and laugh. It was clear they'd all been friends for a while, and I felt a little bit like I was intruding, even though they lived in my apartment. Will asked me if I'd gone to college, and I told him I did, but I dropped out. They all nodded sympathetically, which made me feel stupid. By midnight, I was a little bit buzzed, and my guard was beginning to fall. I had to admit, I felt weak in my friends. I already mentally resigned myself to a life of solitude, at least for a while, but it seemed that might not actually have to be my fate. I laughed at Mateo and Gianna's drunken argument, passing a cigarette back and forth with May, blowing the smoke out of my open window. I had almost completely forgotten why they were over when it happened. All at once, a blaring alarm came from each of our phones like an Amber Alert. I could hear the sound echo throughout the neighborhood like an entire chorus of hundreds of phones going off, not just ours. I nearly leapt out of my skin. Not even
Oh,
Gianna
get
laughed.
fucked.
All of them were
Thanks,
quiet,
Heavy.
looked at me as I
Right
took
out.
it out, frowning
Yep,
at the
there you go.
screen. Do not interfere. He's coming, Will whispered. He had changed, his eyes almost glassy, his voice soft and shaky. Mateo squeezed his shoulder. I looked at her. Her eyebrows were cinched together in concern, and she was stubbing out our cigarette against the windowsill, shrinking away. And there was a demon, that shook. It crept up my back, spreading along my scalp and making me shiver. Something felt deeply, deeply wrong. The others were quiet, staring silently at the window I was sitting up against. The air felt somehow warmer, like it was buzzing with something. Maybe I was just sweating. We sat there unmoving for what felt like half an hour. Right as I was getting tempted to ask what was going on, I heard it. It was far away and faint, but I still heard it. A cry. It continued as it got gradually closer, louder, more desperate. Help! Please, my God, someone help me. Slowly, I leaned out the window. I had to see it with my eyes. I had to confirm there was actually someone out there like they had said there would be. My new apartment was on the 4th floor, so it was hard to see who's down the street without smoke. In the flickering streetlights, I could make out the outline of an elderly man. He was hunched over, wandering aimlessly from door to door, wearing only what looked like a hospital gown to cover his pale, broken body. Behind him trailed a path of dripping blood, although I couldn't see where it was coming from. Please, I'm hurt. I looked back at the others, my mouth hanging open. What is this? I demanded loudly. What the hell is this? May touched my arm, trying to calm me down. I pulled away from her. Arden, please. We have to help him. Why can't we help him? He's just an old man. We can't help him. Trust me. I ignored her, leaning further out the window, prepared to call out to him. Before I could open my mouth, I froze. The man down there was still now, facing our building. His head was tilted upwards, and I couldn't see his eyes, but I knew he was looking right at me. I immediately felt cold, like I was plummeting into ice water. Help me, he whimpered into the silent night air. His voice barely moved. Then he began to scream. That scream wasn't human, or at least not any human I'd ever met. It was desperate, agonized. It made my stomach turn and my eyes prick with tears. I couldn't look away. The blood was coming from his arms, or should I say, his lack of arms. Where his arms should be, there were only bloody, mangled stumps. They looked fresh. He didn't move other than a shaky sway, and his eyes didn't leave me. His shriek slowly molded into words that I could just barely understand. Please, 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 please! May yanked me backwards away from the window. I landed on my ass and felt pain and horror. What is that thing? I whispered. I didn't mean to whisper, but that was all that came out. I don't know, May replied, her eyes trained on Will, who was crying now. Mateo held on to him like he might topple over. We just need to follow the rules. What happens if you don't follow the rules? I asked, and immediately regretted it. Will sobbed softly. Outside, the old man wailed. Gianna reached over and pulled the window shut, but it somehow did nothing to muffle the blood-curdling sound. Do you want to tell her, or should I? Mateo asked Will. Will just shook his head. He was clutching his locket now, turning the little heart over between his fingers. Mateo sighed and turned towards me. A couple of months ago, one of them got to Will's girl. Shannon, Gianna butted in. Her name was Shannon. Her name is Shannon. I swallowed, but whatever I did, nothing would force down the lump in my throat. What happened? Mateo shook his head. We don't know. We were all together when the screaming started. Usually we just ignore it now, you know? No use in dwelling in it. But that night, we think she saw something different. She started insisting she had to help, and she ran outside. We couldn't stop her. He paused, glancing over at Will. He was silent
Coming to your window.
and still. The screaming
Window,
outside
window.
had begun to pass, getting softer as it continued further down the street. Then what? He shrugged. Nothing.
Oh, hell.
I
Window
pressed my
tag
lips
heavy.
together, trying to process all of this. I really had believed they were listening to me, but I had seen it. I had
Mid.
witnessed it firsthand, and it terrified me. Why doesn't anyone leave? He shrugged for a second time. Can't afford it, or people just don't care. Some people have left, but we all signed an NDA with the lease, so nobody ever knows. I frowned, thinking back to signing the paperwork, trying to remember. I could vaguely picture what he was talking about. I'd assumed it was just more legal jargon I would never understand. Had I seriously signed a non-disclosure agreement without even noticing? After that, I told them I wanted to go to bed. I needed time to process all of this. They understood, and each one of them said goodbye before leaving my room. As I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, for some reason I thought of May's face when we had realized it was happening. How she'd put out the cigarette and backed away from the room. I spent more and more time with my new
What the
neighbors.
fuck?
I came to find that they were right. I don't think there was a single person in our entire building. I saw them all the time leaving. Settling in was difficult. The others seemed so used to it. They cared, of course, scared,
Short.
especially Will. But you could tell they had been here a while by the way they sighed, closing the blinds, focusing harder on whatever they were doing. Eventually, I began to mimic them. It helped a little bit to pretend it was normal, as strange as that sounds. Moving out wasn't really an option for me anyways. I was a college dropout and I hadn't found a job yet.
Can
I
I
was
get a
still just getting by on what I managed to save up.
Jeez.
Every night it was someone different. Some were more human, some seemed less. Some were drenched in blood, their clothes ripped and strange, but some looked fairly normal. The worst were the children. They would run like injured chickens, screeching and banging on doors, begging for help. Sometimes they would try different things, say different things. Like, they're coming. Like, I don't want to die. Or even, I'm sorry. There were a lot of children. One night, while I was half awake, an alarm went off. It wasn't like the one on her phone, only somewhat muffled by my window. My apartment glowed with flashing lights. I didn't even look. I was too scared of what I might see. I just covered my head with a pillow and tried to fall back asleep. I came to learn all the theories, especially from Gianna. She thought we had all been chosen and predetermined to live here, all for some sick government game. She thought maybe there were people betting on the different buildings, putting down money on who would interfere the least. See that? She said to me one day in the hallway, returning from a coffee run. Cameras everywhere. I didn't know. I spent time with May mostly. We smoked on the front steps and we watched. It was strange to see what at night was such a sinister and gruesome neighborhood during the day, bright and lively. She didn't talk much about the rules, so I didn't either. We didn't talk about much. I found myself enjoying each other's company. Right when I was beginning to feel comfortable was
What
when it happened.
bullshit.
It all started with a birthday cake. Happy birthday! As May walked through the door, Mateo blew into his plasticky party horn. The paper inflated, smacking Will in the side of the head. May's hand flew to her heart. Jesus Christ, you fuckers know I hate surprises. Gianna laughed and walked over to her. In her hands, she held a chocolate cake, haphazardly adorned with sprinkles and bright pink icing that read, Happy Birthday, May, in the center. 24, she set down the cake on the dresser and threw her arm around May's
One on
neck.
short, one on
How does
short.
it feel? Fucking awful. That's the spirit. Enough of this, Mateo cut in, weaving between them. Let's eat some cake, then let's go. Their tradition, I'd learned, was to bar hop for birthdays. They told me there was no curfew here, despite the rules, just a recommended
Coming
time to
window.
be home, which was 10:30. Usually, they said they got home before the alarm or was gonna run somewhere else. We all took some photos. The boys took shots in the kitchen to pregame while I watched Gianna fuss over May's hair. I was never much of a party. Well, at clubs or bars in college, out back chatting with the smokers. But then again,
Really
I
that
was never
fun,
much of a friend group person either, so maybe the circumstances were changing. I watched them all troop outside to Mateo's car. I stuffed myself in the back,
Last one,
incredibly
David.
conscious of how close I was pressed into May. My other shoulder rammed into the car
He's
door.
in apps.
Mateo's
with an orb.
music, cranked up to maximum volume, hurt my ears, and the tiny space was packed with the smell of tobacco and various
No, it's not.
perfumes as we sped down the freeway toward the city, but it was nice. It was really nice. I found myself laughing with them, and I hooked my arm around a Maze when she weaseled her hand beneath my elbow. It was actually nice. As predicted, the bars they chose weren't exactly my scene. But this time, as opposed to college, I could stand it. I took shots, I followed them out for smoke breaks, I even danced under the low purple lights until my feet ached inside my chunky heels, surely riddled with blisters. By the time we got to our third bar, I couldn't feel it anymore. And it was
Oh, it's
at that third
death.
bar that we crammed ourselves into an old photo booth, and Gianna reluctantly offered $5 to the slot, and we laughed, red-faced, into a tiny camera. After the photos spit out into the compartment, the others slid through the red curtains. But before I could follow, May grabbed my wrist. She held me back, sliding her long baby blue nails up my wrist. I shivered. You never gave me a birthday present, she whispered.
Oh, one
I
window.
could feel her breath in my face. If I was wearing my glasses, they would be fogging up. Yeah, well, I didn't get to finish my quip before she kissed me. It was nice. And then it wasn't. Hey! Will called out to me, squeezing through a crowd of men wearing tattered leather jackets to get to me. Arden, where's everybody else? I blinked, looking around. I could have sworn they had been right there at the start, but now none of them were anywhere to be found. I shrugged. Dunno. Why, what's up? He finally broke free from the swaying mass and got a better look at him. He looked worried. His face was flushed, and I could see a few drops of sweat creeping out from his hairline. He took his phone out of his pocket and held it out to me. First, I saw his home screen.
Terminated by again.
It was him next to a girl with strawberry blonde hair, both clutching beer bottles and grinning widely at the
Oh,
camera.
good man.
Then I looked where he actually wanted me to. The time, 1:47 a.m. It's getting late, he narrated. Can we find the others and get going? I understood then. He was worried. It was past 1 a.m. and no alarm yet. Later than usual. The bars would start closing soon. He wanted to get back. Will and I weaved through the crowd. I was pretty buzzed, and I realized I was having a hard time moving my feet right, which made me feel embarrassed. I
Triple
hadn't
stack,
even
one
had
triple
that
stack.
much to drink. Was I that much of a lightweight? We found them outside, chain smoking. Will explained the situation while I
One
swayed.
jungle.
The drive was
Under palace.
strangely intense. Mateo's music was turned down, and there wasn't any joking. It was just gossiping that would have been on the way out. We all felt it. It didn't need to be said. Something was off. Will drove fast, almost reckless, in the dark, naked. Just as he was careening around the last corner, and we
One
could
stairs,
almost
one
make out
CT.
the shape of our apartment building down the street, it happened. All of our phones went off at once. Gianna let out a small shriek from the other side of the backseat. Do not interfere. Mateo turned back towards us, pressing his finger to his lips. Had this ever happened before? By their reactions, I didn't think so. It was different when it came when I was in my bedroom, when I could just shut the curtains and put my headphones on. I felt so small and helpless then, like I was gazing into the maw of something incomprehensibly beyond my understanding. I felt like we were all flies, and this neighborhood right now was a spider's web. Will drove slowly now, maybe 5 miles an hour. We were all still, we were all silent, not even a stray breath cut through the quiet. Underneath the rolling streetlights, I could make out the side of Will's face. He was pale, and if I hadn't seen his knee shifting as he pressed down on the brakes, I could have mistaken him for a mannequin. The car came to a stop. I followed his gaze all the way down the street to the dark horizon, and I saw what he saw. A silhouette. It was far too distant to make out what shape it took, but it was evidently humanoid. It moved in a shaky stumble, limping down the middle of the road in our direction, and in the overwhelming silence I could hear it, far away but still deeply urgent. Help me. Will, Gianna hissed. Turn the car around. Will didn't move. He just stared forward, as white as paper. It didn't make any logical sense, but I knew what he knew. It was too late. There was no use. Help me. Please help. I could tell now that it was a girl from his voice. Its figure was a guy. It was wearing some sort of white nightgown, not unlike the old man's hospital attire from that first night, stained with dark red blood. From here, I couldn't tell if it was fresh or dry. I didn't know why that mattered to me. Maybe, May whispered. Her arm shook against mine. Maybe if we're quiet and we duck down and deep down I felt as hopeless as turning around.
Oh, someone shot me on A.
I nodded and did as she suggested, crouching behind the passenger seat, my knees throbbing from the strange angle I'd bent myself into. We all did it, except for Will. He didn't move. He just looked. When he finally spoke, I could barely hear him. It was so weak. Shannon. The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. Mateo was the one to break the silence. What? Shannon, he repeated, finally turning his head to look at his friend. That's Shannon. I peered over the seat in front of me, squinting my eyes. The human-like thing was getting closer, and now I could make out strawberry blonde hair, brown face,
Why would you
short
not
legs.
move with the bomb,
The
dude?
girl from Will's phone lock screen. The girl who had disappeared. Shannon. May gasped next to me. Dude, Mateo said slowly. His words were
Oh my god, I suck ass! I suck ass!
Seen like he was in shock.
Oh my god, we suck! We suck!
We're
so shit, bro.
Sickening cry ring.
Oh, that was funny.
Help me! Help! Help me, please, someone! It hurts! It was getting far too close for us for comfort, but it didn't seem to notice the car. Its cries became more and more desperate as they got louder. I have to help her, Will repeated, and a bit of life had returned to his voice. Mateo shook his head and grabbed at his sleeve. Will, that is not Shannon. Will glared at him, his eyes shining with tears. I know Shannon, that's her. I know you do. I know you miss her, but please, please don't do this. Their voices were getting louder and more distraught, and I felt May press into my side, trembling like a leaf. Gianna was whimpering, and I couldn't see her from my position. The thing was almost to our car when it stopped. She turned her head, left, then right,
Maybe not.
almost like she was sniffing the air. The boys stopped arguing. I felt like my
Think they're
heart
slow
would burst
moving like
right
the
out of
road
my
days.
chest. I could see Shannon's face now, and I realized why she hadn't seen us. The girl's face was streaked with gore, and it looked like her eyes had been scooped out with a melon spoon. She cried, drool pouring from her slackened mouth, but no tears would come. It happened too quickly. None of us could stop him. Will violently ripped his arm away from Mateo, fumbling for the handle. Gianna screamed. Mateo tried to slam down the lock, but he missed, and Will managed to get the door open before he could try again. He stumbled onto the asphalt and hit the ground with a soft crunch. The thing turned her head and made a swing. And instead of charging me, she backed away. She had her arms out in front of her like something might attack her, whipping her head around wildly. An alarm went off, like the one I had heard that one night, but far more unbearable now that I was in it. The street lights lining either side of the street switched to a flashing red, and Mateo threw himself into the driver's seat, the tires screeching as he peeled away. Gianna was screaming at him,
No, I don't
pleading
think
with him to go
anything's gonna
back.
beat the
May
two.
was weeping into her hands.
Fucking
I didn't move.
disappointing.
I didn't make a sound. I didn't understand.
That was the
As we sped away,
highlight
I
of this
looked
game.
back. I couldn't help it. I saw the flash of some sort of van in the blinding red light, pulling around the corner. Then nothing. That was a week or two ago. I don't know. I've been having a hard time keeping track of time. None of us have spoken much since that night. We tried the
okay, you
police,
got
of
two in
course,
mid.
but as you could assume, nothing came out of it. I think whatever this is far larger than we know. I don't know if it's some kind of experiment or just a sick
They've
game,
gone up attack.
but I'm going to move back in my parents' house next week, despite all their berating, and then figure out what to do from there. I don't know if that really was Shannon that we saw that night, or if it was something else. And I don't know which is worse. All I know is that last night, I heard Will's voice outside my window, crying, pleading for help. I didn't interfere. There's people in the basement. Hey man, I don't know how to tell you this, but there's people in the basement. Chris's words were in between a silence and a whisper. I sat up in the bed, my eyes adjusting to the frantic figure in front of me. What? I asked him. What are you talking about? Be quiet, dude, he whispered. There's people in the fucking basement. Like 6 of them, I swear to God. He paused, taking a few deep breaths. We should get the fuck out of here. I rubbed my eyes, trying to get the fatigue to settle so I could comprehend the magnitude of what he was
Blue ain't
saying.
saying
For
shit.
context, my friends and I had booked
Nope,
an
flash
Airbnb
eye.
near the mountains for the weekend.
Double
Hike
flash eye.
and drink, get our minds off of work and school. I had
Oh,
been
I got
super
fucking
tired after
shot.
hiking, so I'd taken I shouldn't. Down to the basement? I asked. We weren't supposed to. They told us not to. Yeah, dude, I know, Chris continued. But I did it anyway. I saw people down there. Fucking leave ASAP. What kind of people? I asked, pretty much fully awake now. You mean the owners of this place? They came back? Chris shook his head. weren't them.
Oh, he's a god! He's a god!
Fucking people. I sat up, thinking that maybe Chris had taken some of the LSD we'd been saving for the next day.
You
Fuck,
see his
dude,
profile
relax,
picture, that's the
I told
grin
him.
he's making right
Explain
fucking
exactly what you saw. He laid it out pretty concisely. Despite the fact that the people who had posted the listing had explicitly told us not to go down there, Chris had gotten drunk, gotten curious, and went down there. To his surprise, the door had been unlocked. He couldn't find the light switch, but there was just enough of it coming through the windows for him to be able to make his way down the stairs. Arriving at the bottom, he allowed his eyes a few seconds to readjust. And right in front of him, he could see a small table with about 6 people sitting around, their outlines illustrated by the afternoon light. At first, his brain rationalized it as large dolls or puppets that had been placed there, but he continued looking at them, and eventually one of them turned their heads to face him. He didn't stick around after that,
Yeah, I'm hearing
and shot up
A.
the
Oh,
stairs,
no, that's what he
shutting
does.
the door behind him. As he told me this, I kind of didn't want to believe him. There was also absolutely no reason why he'd be lying. He just wasn't that type of guy.
Ooh, I'm running away!
Coupled with the genuine fear on his face, I began leaning towards the idea that he was telling the truth and that there actually were a bunch of people sitting silent at a table in the
got bumped on me.
darkness of the basement. I got up and looked out the bedroom windows, seeing Jay and Paul standing on the front porch, grilling burgers. Then I looked back at Chris. If you're telling the truth, we need to call the people who own this place. I tried, he said. They didn't pick up. I've sent them texts as well. I shook. So what? Do you think they're dangerous? Should we call the cops? Chris shrugged. I don't know, he said. I don't know if there's dangerous, but they are as fuck didn't look right, and I want to get out of here. For a while, we stared at each other, the general silence of the house becoming progressively more ominous. After a while, I sighed. Yeah, let's get out of here. We grabbed our phones, wallets, the car keys, and moved down the stairs, out of the house as fast as we could. Jay and Paul were laughing, holding beers as we approached them.
Fellas,
Paul turned around, pointing a greasy spatula towards us. You guys hungry or what? He asked. Chris began telling them what he'd seen, but it was obvious that they were more than a few drinks deep and not taking anything he was saying seriously. Dude, it sounds like you're fucking tripping, Jay said. Are you sure you're not tripping?
Ooh,
I'm being
I just
serious.
hit him with an A.
Chris said. I swear to fucking God, I'm serious. We need to get out of here now. Well, I'm about 5 beers in, so I ain't driving, Jay said. And I sure
Yeah,
as
that's
hell
what
ain't
I'm
letting
thinking.
any of you drive my truck either. Are you sure you weren't just seeing shit? Fine. I'm walking then, Chris said. I'm not staying here. Look,
all
I'll go
thrown
down there
bagels
and
to
talk
fight.
to them, Paul said, half joking. See what the hell they want. Jay laughed as sheer disbelief washed over Chris's face. I'm not bullshitting, man, he said. I'm not. Yeah, I
Nice,
believe
one
you,
up.
Paul said dismissively. I'll go and see what's up. Chris continued to protest, but Paul wouldn't budge, and soon he was inside the house, making his way towards the basement. Chris shook his head, his eyes wide, nearly bulging out of his head at this point. Fuck this, he yelled, seeming to grow more agitated by the second. I fucking warned you. Before we could say anything else, he bolted, sprinting like a bat out of hell towards the woods. We tried chasing after him, but couldn't come close to matching his pace. We stopped, panting for air as we watched him disappear into the trees. What the fuck? Jay asked. Is he being serious? I thought it was a joke. I shook my head. Let's go check on Paul. We ran back to the house, entering to see the basement door wide open. The place was completely silent, but before I could call out, I could hear somebody moving up the stairs. I backed up, unsure of what to expect. When Paul came out of the darkness, he was somewhat bewildered. He looked at us, shook his head. This is freaky. Was he being for real? Jay asked. There's people down there? Not exactly. The three of us went down there with my nerves yet to be completely settled. We couldn't find a light switch, but there were enough windows and enough daylight for us to move around. Turns out, Chris hadn't been totally correct, but he probably hadn't been lying either. Planted right in front of the stairs was a table with 3 chairs. Sitting in those 3 chairs were some of the most lifelike sculptures I'd ever seen. 2 soldiers in military outfits and a woman in some kind of long religious dress. They weren't quite enough to be uncanny. If you looked at them for more
Definitely
than a few
unders.
seconds, you could tell that they were carved from stone and then meticulously painted,
They're
something
not
you
on
could
B.
confirm by touching them. Still, they were exceptionally crafted, something that could have only been achieved by a dedicated professional. I mean, I don't blame him,
think I
Paul
had one
said,
out.
referring to Chris. I almost shat bricks when I first saw them. I mean, what the fuck? I remember back to the
Nothing on
conversation
this.
I'd had with him, how he'd claimed that one of them actually looked at
bomb
him,
anyway, I'm
and then a
coming.
shiver ran down my spine.
Never
Jay's
mind.
laughed, a palpable relief in his voice. How much do you think you could sell these for? I'm down to take them and find out, Paul joked. On the surface, it made enough sense. The homeowners were in
Hey, better
possession
than
of
me,
some
man.
very
I'm getting
valuable
like
items they
66.
stored in the basement, simply forgetting to lock it this time. Jay and Paul continued looking at them, taking pictures, marveling at how weird it all was. On the other hand, I wasn't so keen on doing so. I wanted to get the hell out of the basement ASAP. The details just weren't adding up. I knew Chris well. If the only thing he'd seen had been these statues, he would not have reacted the way he did. Jay was looking at his phone, smiling at the pictures he'd taken, when suddenly his expression dropped. He put his phone down and looked ahead. There's another one over there, in the corner. What do you mean? Paul asked, looking closely at one of the soldiers' rifles. Another statue in the corner. Paul looked up and looked towards where Jay was pointing. Oh, he said. Yeah, I see it. The two of them continued to look at it, but showed no indication of wanting to explore it. Instead, they stood still, their expressions slowly
One TV
taken
room
over
sounds like
by
it's on towards B.
a look of deep unease. Eventually, I looked as well. It did appear to be a statue, something tucked away in the dark corners. It was
Bomb
tall,
spotted palace.
extremely so, maybe 7 feet.
killed the guy
Its head well eclipsing the top
Yeah, the
of
last
one
guy
of
was
the
by
bookshelves.
TV room, came in.
Its bottom half was completely obscured, but from what the light was revealing, it was wearing some kind of helmet, like one of those steel ones soldiers were equipped with back in World War I. There came a point as my eyes were adjusting to the darkness where a pit began to form in my stomach. Its features were slowly revealing themselves, and it almost looked as if it were twitching. I thought that maybe it was just the darkness playing tricks until I saw it blink. Clear as day.
Connector.
It blinked. I guess the other two saw the same thing because we were practically trampling each other running up the stairs. We slammed the door shut behind us before quickly pushing one of the couches in front of it. Paul and I were halfway out the front door, but Jay was still inside the house. What the hell are you doing? Paul yelled at him. Come on, I need my laptop, Jay said before throwing Paul his keys. I'll be quick, start the truck. He ran up the stairs where Paul continued to curse at him. Really, dude? Are you fucking serious? And then I remembered my own laptop, thinking about how annoying it would be if I were to lose it. I looked at the basement door, then at the stairs, then at Paul. It's gonna take 5 seconds, I said. I could hear him cursing behind me as I ran, jumping 3 steps at a time until I reached my room, darting in and grabbing my laptop from the desk. As I rushed out of there, I saw that the door to Jay's room was shut. I stopped, slowed my breathing. I was almost certain that he hadn't gone back downstairs. I would have seen him. Heard him. Jay,
Okay.
I asked, what the hell are you doing?
Answer alive.
No response. I looked at the door, but every muscle was frozen, almost as if my body were warning me not to go in. Suddenly it creaked open just slightly and jumped back.
Bench
Jay?
tank heavy, man.
Still no response. I couldn't see anything through the crack until my eyes drifted upwards. A pair of eyes looking down at me. Large eyes set too far apart on a face with skin that was too pale. I turned and bolted back downstairs as I heard the door swing open noticeably. Of course, I didn't look back and ran outside and jumped into the passenger seat of the truck. Where is he? Paul asked. Just fucking drive, I told him. He didn't protest and stepped on
the
the
bench
gas,
was
gripping down the road. I continued driving until we reached us, first with other people. By that point, we had called and messaged the homeowners about a dozen times each. Nothing but radio silence on the other end.
That guy
We
was
even
1
noticed that the listing
HP!
itself had been removed from Airbnb entirely. And then we called the police. Somebody answered and I explained the situation as in-depth as I could. The operator listened without interrupting, waited a few seconds, and then asked me for the address. I told it to her. Another bout of silence elapsed before
Oh,
she
I
hung
sold
up.
all my stuff.
After arriving back in the city, we considered reporting it again, but neither of us felt the nerve to do so. We also haven't heard from Chris. We've gone to his apartment and knocked on his door, but nobody answers. I tried to do some research on the place, Googling the cabin's address. One result came up, a website that appeared to consist solely of an album of black and white images of soldiers standing in various places.
Excuse me, sir. You're blocking my
Dates,
way.
addresses
Yes,
written
thank you.
beneath them in small text. I control F'd and found the address I was looking for. The accompanying photo was of a tall soldier holding a blood-stained
Sit
hatchet
down,
and
motherfuckers.
standing in a clearing surrounded by trees, with the outline of the cabin. The man's skin was pale, his eyes oddly large and set so wide apart that it just didn't look right. There were also 2 dates attached to it, August 17th, 1915, and the date that we had arrived at the cabin. It's been almost a week removed from the incident that Paul and I have both made a mutual decision to drop it, to try and go back to our ordinary lives. But it's been difficult. I keep expecting to receive a phone call from the cops, asking me questions about Chris and Jay, where I'd seen them last. Those guys have family. They probably knew where they were headed and who'd they gone with. And yet, nobody's reaching out. It doesn't feel like we're out of the clear here. It doesn't feel like this is over at all. My house is empty, but my friend, who is deaf and blind, insists someone is here. They say seeing is believing, but if I'd followed that advice, I'd be dead now. It was a deaf, blind friend who first told me there was someone in the house with me.
Oh my
I
god.
scoffed. I looked out across the wide I looked upstairs in the den and spare
One
bedroom
on
and out
site.
the patio
That's
and
it.
in the kitchen. It was just the two of us. My friend Will insisted, while he was sitting on the base of the stairs, tracing his fingers along the ornate
You
sculpted
don't know that,
banister.
it's Scruffy.
I went upstairs to grab something from the den. He felt another
behind
set
Scribble.
of footsteps on the stairs after mine, following me up. He told me afterward in sign language when we sat down at the table for tea. Then he asked me who else was here. I chuckled, my fingers tickling his leg in laughter, and told him he must have imagined it. But he claimed he could smell someone.
No way you
When I asked
rotated,
him
right?
to describe the smell, he said it smelled bad. A sort of garbage smell. Someone who needed a bath or hung out in trash. Maybe my trash needed to go out, I said, and insisted it was just us. Are you sure? He and I were supposed to be working on the script for a game we were developing together, but he
20
interrupted
seconds.
my suggestions to
He's
exclaim,
pointing at pointing
"There!
at.
Do you smell it? I didn't smell a thing, nor did I see anyone. Does
I'm
your nose
trash,
actually
but you
work
should
as
connect them.
a decoration on your face? Will
Yeah,
burst,
he's
a connector.
exasperated. When I dropped him off back at his apartment later after we'd finished our work together, as he was getting out of the car, he warned me again that I definitely have another person hiding somewhere in my home. His hands described the feel to me. 2 fingers of his right hand walking up my arm toward my shoulder.
No, that was the
2
best
fingers
one.
of his left following behind, softly. Then he tapped his hand along my arm and showed me the feel of vibration.
Nice!
First
job.
heavier, more solid, my steps, and then lighter, but still palpable, the second set of steps following mine and vibrating the wooden stairs. I patted his arm in affirmation and told him I'd search the house when I got home. Be careful,
Here we
he
go.
said, his signing emphatically slow,
Shit's getting real.
and gave my arm a final
Do you need a
squeeze before
bio,
tapping his way to the front of his building with his white cane. As soon as I got home, I searched the house, but I couldn't imagine where an intruder might conceal themselves. It was a cozy home, 2 levels with small square footage. The rent was suspiciously low, but I chalked that up to the lack of AC, creaking pipes, and the age of the place. I looked under the sink, in the closets, in the cupboards, in the spare bedroom. I even bought a camera and set it up, but all I captured overnight was myself sleepwalking. I vaguely remembered waking on the staircase and returning to
They're doing
bed.
another delay
Other
push.
than that, the motion capture didn't turn on. According to the video, I was alone in my house. Still, the next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about what he had said. It said that if you lose one sense, your others become sharper to compensate, but what if the reverse is also true?
Nice.
Was my reliance on my eyes causing my brain to shut out my other senses? What if I
Go on,
tried closing
Aizen!
my eyes? It seemed silly. Even so, on a whim, that evening I went around the house wearing a blindfold. I was sitting in the kitchen, filling a glass with water from the sink.
There we go.
Heard,
No
felt
way.
the presence of someone. I couldn't pinpoint why.
Fucking GG,
The
hi,
sense
yellow!
of not being alone. The hairs on my neck rose, and suddenly I was absolutely certain someone was coming up behind me. I snatched off my blindfold. Just me. Still, the feeling lingered for a moment, those goosebumps persisting on my arms. I put the blindfold back on and puttered around in the kitchen for a while. It was then I noticed the smell, like rotten meat, like unwashed fish, spoiled and awful, and it was so faint, just wafting occasionally. The hairs on the nape of my neck stood up. I went upstairs trying to follow the smell, but almost immediately my mind did. I came back upstairs, my fingers lightly tracing the wall. Thud, thud, thud.
Oh, short.
Stopped because
No!
I felt footsteps. Felt
Good
soft
game.
vibration on the wooden staircase, just a beat after my own. It was just like Will had described to me. Someone was here, right behind me. I felt cold breath on my ear. I tore off the blindfold and whirled around. The staircase was empty. That night, as I lay in bed, I had trouble drifting to sleep. I was afraid of what might happen overnight. And sure enough, I woke up on the stairs sleepwalking. But instead of returning to bed, I tried to keep myself in that dreamy state, and I held my eyes closed. My arm was cold. It took me a moment to realize that someone was holding my hand. A touch of icy fingers drawing me forward. Those dead fingers